Hello and welcome to the Browns Blitz. Today is Sunday, February 20th. This is episode number 138. I am your host, Rod Bloom. Joining me today is my brother, Jeff. Hey, Jeff. How are things going today?
Hey, Rod. Hey, doing all right.
Hey, we're
been a tricky weekend, but I'm looking forward to talking to our guest today. I've actually wanted to speak with this guy for a long time. I really respect what he does, and I think he has the coolest first name in sports.
I would agree with you. So joining us today is Thor Nystrom. Follow him at ThorKU. Thor's the senior content creator for college football and NFL draft for NBC Sports Edge. Thor, how's things going today?
They're going well. Good to be joining you boys, and I'm excited to talk about some NFL draft stuff. And with the combine coming up, we're really ramping up, so I'm excited.
Yeah, we'll kind of put the disclaimer out because we're doing this earlier than we normally would because we wanted to have you on the show. Because I think of this and it's like this is your time of year when you get really busy, obviously. But I know how busy you are with this year round. This is not like a thing where you work 3 months out of the year. I'm sure you're working on this all the time. So I don't want to make the rest of the year sound like you're not doing anything. But, the next, what do we have? 6 weeks? 6 weeks or so, till the draft is when you're, really kicking it into gear and your calendar is probably blocked out by the hour. So we appreciate you taking this time with us. But the disclaimer is that, the combine hasn't happened yet. And we're still a ways away. So what you hear today is based on the information that's, out there right now and the research that Thor's done up to this point and everything. So I guess the first thing that we always want to start with, Thor, is what are your general thoughts on this draft class? Strengths, weaknesses, and what do you like about it? What do you not like about it?
I think, like if you're just looking at the differences between this year's class and last year's class, this one is definitely deeper. Last year's class, it was cut off at like 650 or 700 prospects or something like that, just because you had the NCAA waived the eligibility for 2020 for COVID. So you could have all these, 5th and 6th year seniors that normally their eligibility would be exhausted that were coming back to college. So last year we had in terms of modern times for draft, a historically shallow pool, just in terms of numbers. This class is way deeper in terms of the numbers, but I'm talking like triple. And so you have that, just number one. I think this class, maybe you could argue that it's a little bit less top heavy, but I think that's mostly due to the discrepancy in quarterback classes. Last year, of course, at the very, very top, you had, Lawrence and Lance and Wilson, all these, Fields, all these different guys. And so there was maybe a perception that it was more top heavy. But again, I think that is mostly due to the quarterback class. And that is one thing that's a little bit down for this year.
So just off top of your head, just give me a couple of your favorite prospects at this point.
Definitely Malik Willis. This not to go against what I just said, as far as the quarterback class goes, but the last year's quarterback class, I think anyone looking at it, they at least you're going to plant your flag on a couple guys is like, this guy is not going to bust. I don't think there's a chance that he's going to bust. In this quarterback class, it's different because you don't have that sure thing. You don't have that sort of surefire thing that you prospect that you feel really, really good, is going to develop or whatever. So in a class like that, I want to go for the highest ceiling guy. And that is so very clearly Malik Willis. He has the tools for me, I comp him to a right-handed Michael Vick because there's just so few guys in the history of the NFL that you can compare to his athleticism and his arm strength. Michael Vick is one of the very few. So he would definitely be up there. He was my quarterback one going into the Senior Bowl week. And that's, at the time it wasn't was far from a consensus take. And now it's becoming more so. I think he's going to dominate at the combine too and keep rising. So he would definitely be one of my sort of pet guys. A sleeper running back that I like going deeper. I'm a big fan of Tyler Goodson from Iowa. I think he was stuck in a really, really bad situation in college. His offense just stunk, and the offensive line last year was probably the worst Iowa had put out in the last 20 years. And that's including having Tyler Linderbaum in the middle have the best center season that PFF has ever graded. Their guards and their tackles were way off from what Iowa Hawkeye football usually is, and their quarterbacks were awful. So he was sort of a marked man every time they snapped the ball. And he didn't have much of a line of defense in front of him as far as blocking for him. So he'd be another guy. I mean, I could keep tossing you names at different positions. There's all sorts. I like Bull Melton at receiver, another Big Ten kid. He goes to Rutgers, but like way deeper down, like a day 3 type prospect that because of circumstance, I think he's going to go lower than his talent level indicates he ought to go.
Yeah, guys, there's so many directions I go here. Let's just we'll get into the Browns a little bit later. Okay, I think we'll just talk in general at first. So Jeff, jump in here whenever you want. But let's talk a little bit more about this quarterback class, because the situation with the Browns with Baker being in his fifth season, and there's Baker lovers, Baker haters, and the Browns are in a spot where they need to either, after the season, try to sign Baker long term or go another direction. So there's potential the Browns go, take a quarterback in this draft. So when I look, my first thought in looking at this quarterback class was there's not a lot of size with many of these guys. And Malik Willis obviously has the tools, and some other guys have tools, but there's not a lot of size. How many developmental guys are really in this class? And and Jeff, you can jump in on this with some other guys who you're thinking about.
Sure.
I mean, there's other guys that people bring up, Desmond Ridder, and other guys that are probably further down. But how many guys do you think in this draft class can really develop into, a solid starter in the NFL?
That potential, maybe 5 that you would feel comfortable. If you had a top 2 round pick, maybe that you could say that about. Willis is the only guy that I think has the tools to be a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. The rest of these guys, you're talking about, it's still a band of outcomes, but the bonanza ceiling for the guy isn't nearly as exciting. Like, for instance, Kenny Pickett, he probably still, at this point, maybe the tide has turned a little bit, as far as the QB1 consensus, but heading into the Senior Bowl, he was, the industry consensus for sure was Kenny Pickett was QB number 1. Well, his bonanza upside, it's like Kirk Cousins, like if everything goes right for him, or Andy Dalton in his prime. Like you're talking about something like that. And again, that is the very high end of his ceiling if everything goes right for him. And he's supposed to be the quarterback 1. Sam Howell, he gets ubiquitous comps to Baker Mayfield, going back multiple years now. I don't think I would put it as he's Baker Mayfield like, but only if it was a better runner, but not nearly as ballsy of a passer. And there's a risk aversion to Sam Howell's game that is going to make me knock him down. That's what I think the difference is between him and Baker. Sam Howell just won't test windows if he doesn't think he has the best of it. In a way that I think is detrimental to his game. You mentioned the size thing. That one guy for sure that goes against that, because a lot of these guys, they are, Matt Corral is a small guy. They list him at 205, but I think he was 190 in college. One guy that's the difference? It's Carson Strong. He's more like your sort of Joe Flacco, or Ryan. He ain't as tall as Ryan Mallett, but it's sort of that prototypical big strapping kid in the pocket with a big arm. But he, as far as the prototype NFL pocket passer, thinking back like classic Coke style of it, Carson Strong is the only guy in the top 7 of this class that would sort of fit that sort of picture in your head.
So what are your thoughts on Strong?
Well, he's got a big arm, and he was very productive in college, and he functionally within the pocket, he had this knee injury where they did surgery on him, but he wanted to play last season. So you'll see him when you watch him on tape, like having this knee brace. He had a knee brace on every single game until the finale. He wasn't that basically confined him to the pocket. And And so, but it doesn't look like that's going to be a long-term sort of a long-term sort of injury. In Mobile, he came out without that knee brace, and he was moving around a little bit better than I thought that he would. But the thing for me was Strong that I'll have him a little bit lower. It's not pessimism about the knee, because I've actually heard from a couple different people that that's not like a long-term thing. It's more that for a guy who's confined to the pocket in an NFL that is increasingly going towards, we want multifaceted offensive tools, not just at quarterback. Of course, you have the dual threat, but you're seeing all this stuff. Like this past season, there was more handoffs given, or carries given to wide receivers than any other season before, and by far, just like you've seen this exponential sort of growth on the chart of like teams are starting to I'll put this in a basketball metaphor way. They started to go to like this concept of like positionless basketball, like in the past like decade. And some teams like they don't have the traditional designations because of the way they play. And it seems like the NFL is going more towards that. And so anyway, Carson Strong, how does he fit into that mold when he if he's on your offense, he's taking away that mobile element or some of these different folds within your playbook that other quarterbacks are able to open up just because of their legs. But like I said, he does have that big arm. He's a very talented passer. Concerns about him beyond what I just stated. It's his ability to perform under pressure. You'll see, looking at his numbers specifically last year, his play under pressure with guys in his face and stuff like that under duress, it dropped off a shelf from his work within a clean pocket. So that's always a concern for me. Can you explain it away as, well, he had this big knee brace on and his knee was swollen all year and it was harder for him to move? Maybe, you might be able to do this. So maybe that projects a little bit better in the NFL. But it also might not, right? Like that just might be a function of his game. The other thing is he's got a big bazooka arm. He's for sure top 3 in this class in terms of arm strength. But this is something that I noticed in Mobile that you also saw a little bit on his tape, which is he misses deep more than you would like for a guy who's one of his big time calling cards is his arm and his arm strength and his ability to push down the field. And so like I saw him sail a lot of throws in Mobile, or his passes would be drifting towards the sideline. Now I talked to someone that is way more how would you say, well versed in the air raid system than myself, and this person is also a bigger fan of Carson Strong than myself. And the way that it was explained to me was that in the air raid system, they teach you if you're going deep that you want, if you're going to miss, you miss long and you miss towards the sideline. And so that, they were sort of trying to, give not an excuse, but like, sort of maybe add some context about that. But for me, I want to see him dropping the ball in the bucket for his receiver more often. Again, because the calling card is his arm.
Yeah.
So, hey, I have a quick question on Carson Strong. And I may tip my hand a little bit when I ask this question, the way I phrase it, but for it sort of, I'm going to call him an old school style quarterback. Fair assessment, right? I mean, he's
yep.
Pocket passer, right?
Yep.
Does that style lend itself better to a team in terms of fit that has a really strong offensive line and wants to run the ball a lot? I mean, I know he didn't take a lot of snaps under center. He was more successful out of the gun. Does that limit your playbook a little bit? Or, what type of offense do you see him fitting best in?
Yeah, well, it for sure limits your playbook, and this could go into a bigger discussion, as far as like people calling Malik Willis raw, but you don't call Carson Strong wrong. You're sort of conflating to like the concept of their game within structure within the pocket when you're not bringing up the fact of all the value that Malik Willis's legs bring. For instance, against a guy like Carson Strong, you don't call him raw, they don't even bring that in, into sort of the discussion when there's two ways to acquire yards in the NFL, and it's not just being able to steal the yards with your legs. It's also the spacing on the field that your legs open up for you. Going back to a basketball metaphor, a guy like you guys are in Ohio. A guy like LeBron James, when he drives, right, like the defense has to collapse on him, which opens up spacing for all the other players on the court. It's why when typically LeBron James teams, they're looking for 3-point shooters around him, because he changes the entire dimensions of the court, whatever. That's something with Carson Strong that you won't have. The RPO game you won't have. Testing the defense outside you won't have. All that sort of stuff. So I definitely agree. As far as all that stuff. And what was the other part of that question? I sort of went on the aside there. The last part of it.
Does he work best within a Browns type offense? In terms of the running game and the strong offensive line.
That's right. Yeah. Probably. I mean, just sort of stylistically, probably yes. Right. Because, like if you were looking at that in comparison to some of these other NFL offenses where, where it's more, you're leveraging more of these other sort of new agey concepts that have come up from college, as far as spreading, as far as like getting the quarterback on the perimeter, stuff like that. And your point's well taken as far as I do think Carson Strong needs to be behind a strong offensive line. And it would be certainly preferable if he had a good running game next to him, because he's going to provide you zero value with, of course, with his legs. So it has to be a more traditional downhill sort of running attack as far as that goes. The other thing I'd say is he was, I don't want to evoke, especially, with an Ohio podcast, evoke Joe Burrow as a thing that, but Joe, so this is absolutely not a comp for Carson Strong at all or anything like that. But Joe Burrow, when the reason that he jumped off at LSU, he always had that talent there, but it was when the more guys that they spread onto the field, the better he got. And he explained it to his offensive coordinator, like, it's just like the snapshot in my head. And he could very quickly process, the bodies moving in space, which is the guy that is going to be open or that I can throw open, et cetera. Carson Strong, he will benefit as well, the more wide receivers that you put out there. And so the other thing I would say about him is an offense that spreads, the defense. You have at least 3 guys out there, maybe even 4, with the single back in the backfield. And you allow, the spacing as far as downfield, intermediate area, and hopefully his arm can shine from there.
Do you have a sense of how teams evaluate that particular skill set? I mean, the ability to view the field and process options and make decisions. I mean, can you compare one player to another in that ability? I mean, I don't know how successful Wonderlic is at predicting that, or are there other metrics that teams use?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And it's one of those things that I think is hard to sort of quantify, right? Like, it's like, with running backs, it's like, I always say, like, what's the most valuable trait for a running back? Well, it's the ability to stay off the turf, to keep your feet about you, right? Like, and with quarterbacks, your point's well taken. The ability to process information extremely quickly and trust your eyes, and then have, like a marionette where the arm is going with the eyes, the full body's going with that, and everything's just seamless like that. It's extremely important, but I don't think that there, to your question about the Wonderlic, I don't think there's one thing where you can point to, and I'm just talking as a broad data set going back 25 years. There's not one thing where you could point to where, like, these guys that when they went to the NFL, they were very clearly just incredible processors of the field. And this is the one thing you can point to that would accurately predict that. I don't think the Wonderlic does it, because we've seen guys come in that have awesome Wonderlics that, as quarterbacks that sort of play like doofuses on the field. And then you have the other way around. For instance, like, didn't Dan Marino have like some shockingly low Wonderlic score? There was a couple studs that did. So I don't necessarily think it's as much as that as this is one of those, there's sometimes the argument between like the tape scouts and like data or analytics type scouts. This is the reason why I think you can't go all the way one way or the other, because this is one of those things that you need to pick up when you're watching the thing. There's no stat that's going to point to it or anything like that. It's sort of an unquantifiable thing. But you see a guy like Joe Burrow or a guy like going older, Drew Brees or Tom Brady. Those were guys that were elite at that. And Carson Strong going into the NFL, he's going to have to become extremely good to elite at that, because he's confined to the pocket.
Yeah. So while I'm thinking about it, Thor, since the combine hasn't happened yet, just as far as you and your process, what kind of weight in the evaluation process do you give the combine for these prospects? And how much as far as the physical part of it, because we don't really know what happens in the interviews, but how much of the physical part of it do you think the NFL teams give compared to what they see on film in the actual interviews?
It's definitely important. In terms of the testing, and then also, I mean, that's the part of the data set that I get access, that we all get access to. They also have a level of, they also put a level of importance upon getting the kid in front of them and talking to him. That's something that that we don't see as much, so we don't get as good of like, for instance, Josh Rosen's year. He was getting trashed by a lot of anonymous quotes that. It turned out that maybe, we should have listened a little bit more, that maybe Josh Rosen wasn't as dedicated to the craft. Whereas some other times, you see it opposite sort of way. But just as far as what, especially for someone like me in terms of this, the testing numbers are extremely important on all ends of the spectrum, because first off, there's guys that will go out and test during this process that are going to eliminate themselves from having they already are, because it's just what their athleticism is. But, if a guy tests in the bottom 10% in terms of spark or in terms of RAS, Kentley Platt's RAS, if they're in the bottom 10% heading into their into the NFL in their position group historically in terms of athleticism, their odds of hanging around in the NFL for more than 2 years are minute. There's some guys that will be able to do it, but I mean, you're talking very, and the odds that they become a standout is, essentially zero. Whereas, you go up higher, to guys that we know are going to get drafted, it becomes more about sort of a degrees thing, where you have questions about certain guys going in. And you don't have questions about, other certain things. Like, for instance, I didn't need Trevor Lawrence to even have a pre-draft process last year to know that he was, going to be one of my top guys. But there's other guys where they got numerous questions. Some of them are really big. For instance, Hakeem Butler, during his draft process, it was, can this guy separate? What is his agility level? That was an extremely important question for his evaluation. And, just as one, for instance, in this one, there's a bunch. And every single time when they go into, whether it's a all-star exhibition after the season or they go to the combine, there's different things that you're looking for. So, like, for instance, with Christian Watson from NDSU, he might be my favorite sleeper receiver, although at this point, I'm not sure that he is a sleeper anymore because of what he did in Mobile. But when he went to Mobile, and I was talking, in fact, I talked about Christian Watson with Eric Edholm of Yahoo on the Tuesday morning, before the first practice. And, because we were both very intrigued by him, but it was the same sort of thing where it was like, we agreed that he was a prototypical outside Green Bay Packer receiver, just base level of what we knew about him. 6'4", over 200 pounds, really well built, and a speed merchant down the field, a high 4.3 speed or low 4.4s. And if you watch everyone that does this, watching the Trey Lance tape last spring, all those bombs that he had downfield in the Fargo Dome, the guy on the receiving end of invariably all of them was Christian Watson. But what you were interested to see is at NDSU, I mean, not only was he playing against the lower competition, but he also, the way that they used him, it was the downfield stuff, just torching people, because NDSU's running offense is so good. You have to, bring people up. It's really hard to devote 2 people deep every single time Christian Watson, wants to go deep. And there's no FCS cornerback that's going to stop him at the line. He's releasing freely. So there was that. But within the scope of that offense, the one they did a lot of the deep shots. They did a lot of the running. What you saw way less of, was his work in the intermediate area. And so I knew he could torch people. I knew he could get off the line. I knew he was a physical specimen. And also, one other thing that I saw in Mobile that I knew about this kid was that he blocks his ass off. The effort he gives on every single play. When there was a long run in Mobile, invariably it was because Christian Watson had either planted his cornerback on the sideline, or else he was 30 yards downfield acting as a lead envoy. At NDSU, if you're playing offense, you are blocking. There's no, you can't be a diva receiver there. But to the point, Christian Watson goes to Mobile. The one thing I'm watching specific, just zeroing in on with him, how are his routes when it's not just running, the 9 route deep, and how is he in the intermediate sector? How is he catching the ball when there's a bunch of garbage and traffic around him? Because downfield, I know that he can win in contested situation downfield. That, you can see that with your eyes, and that's something that the data will bear out too. But again, what we saw less of, it was that intermediate stuff, and it's a different skill set, right? Like a guy like Tyler Johnson at Minnesota, he was not as good with the downfield stuff, or certainly being, an outside receiver, just period. But as far as being a slot receiver, he was extremely good at picking around traffic and, all that sort of stuff that you have to deal with as a slot receiver, just more bodies, there's less space to work with. And then you got to sort of find your spacing or create separation, and then you got to catch the ball, right? And so Watson being on the outside, throughout that week was extremely impressive in those aspects, in the intermediate thing, in the route running thing, just snapping off routes, creating separation, where Kenny Pickett in particular was thrilled to be working with him, as far as like the intermediate stuff, because Watson was coming down with everything he threw to him. So just one example of, you go into these things, you're looking for these very specific things. And when we, flip it forward to the combine, there's all these different guys where like maybe it's a running back that I think probably lacks a high end burst. And so I'm going to be looking to see what his 40 time is, or it's a wide receiver, for instance, in the Hakeem Butler, or DK Metcalf was another guy. There was a huge question about this heading into his process. What's their agility like? What's their lower level explosion like? Very specific things. And then there's some guys I like Jerry Jeudy tested horrible a couple years ago, but I didn't really care because on the field, he's athletic. So I didn't care that he tested as a 20% guy. So there's some guys where the David Bell is a great example in this wide receiver class. You want to see how he tests because he's a good receiver, but the athleticism, you're not exactly sure where that is. Drake London is another one from USC, and very specific things that you're zeroing in on. So short story long, it is important.
Excellent. All right. I'm going to let Jeff jump in on this. The combine, it's important, I think, for probably pretty much every position, but at tight end, you're looking to see which guys are, have the speed, because everybody's looking for the next, tight end that can separate and take a game over. So which guys do you expect to, maybe make a move, and based on the combine and how athletic they'll appear at the combine, and Jeff, which tight ends are you most interested to hear Thor's opinion on?
Well,
So
I
Jeff,
think there's a couple of different types in this draft. The real athletic receiver types, and then the more complete traditional type of tight ends. But I mean, the guy that sort of jumps off the screen, and maybe it's because of the Nevada offense, is Colt Turner. First of all, I love his hair, but in terms of what he does on the field, I think that would give the Browns a different type of player. So I'm interested, to hear what Thor has to say about guys like that, and can we make the tight end position a little bit more dynamic in Cleveland?
Yeah, Colt Turner, he was one of those guys going in the Senior Bowl I was really excited to watch. He was going to get to work some with his quarterback from college. Obviously, Carson Strong was there as well. And he was one of those guys that in college was consistently stretching the seam, and stuff like that. And he, was dangerous down there. He was a little bit stiffer in Mobile than or at least, in terms of the eye test than we thought. So, you talk about a guy where I'm very interested to see how he tests. Colt Turner became one of those guys because, for instance, like Jeremy Ruckert, he looked from Ohio State. He looked a lot more fluid than I thought he would in Mobile. Whereas Colt Turner, and also I thought Romeo Dupes, his college teammate and Strong's college teammate, I thought he was a bit stiffer than I thought from tape. And so, then you start to wonder, is Carson Strong a little bit better than I thought playing these guys up? Or it could just be it could have just been a bad couple of days, for those guys. But Colt Turner, it's a very interesting profile for him, because the receiving element of his game is absolutely there. He has good hands. He lined up in line, quite a bit, and I think probably more than some people would think. Last year he lined up in line. I think it was 75% of the time. So he can go between in line, he can go slot, and you could even put him outside if the athleticism is there. His A dot was very high as well. But one thing we didn't see in college was him running after the catch much, and he also doesn't block much. And so he has to have the athleticism there. We know he's got the hands. There is a sort of natural receiving feel to his game, but the blocking will not be there. So the athleticism needs to be for him to take a slot receiver off the field for you, if that's what he's going to be in the NFL, a big slot.
Gotcha.
So where would you expect those guys to go roughly, Thor? Third, fourth round?
In the tight end class, is really interesting because you were asking just about the overall scope of the class earlier on. Tight end's one of those classes that you don't have, like in this class, you don't have the Kyle Pitts, just crazy standout stud guy. But this tight end class is extremely deep. I think most people have Trey McBride as the first guy, but then after that, you have this big quagmire of guys where I think they could go anywhere between the second or sixth round, and they're still sort of differentiating themselves. I like Jalen Weidemeyer from Texas A&M a lot before this past season. This past season, he played down a bit. He for sure would have been my tight end one if it was like these guys coming out of 2020. So he's a guy that I need to go back and watch a little bit more. Jeremy Ruckert, I mentioned him. He was one of the stars of the Senior Bowl. Cade Otton, Isaiah Likely, Jake Ferguson, Charlie Kolar. You guys mentioned Colt Turner, Dulcich from UCLA. He was opening up some eyes there. Daniel Bellinger has a lot of fans in the league. As a guy who's a really good blocker, inline kind of guy, where maybe you can get some receiving value out of him as well. And then, because of the depth of the class, there's guys later on where if you're just looking at them for a very specific kind of utility, I think you'll be able to find those as well. For instance, Grant Calcaterra out of SMU, he was a very highly touted prospect who had gone to Oklahoma. And he'd been sort of stuck there, but behind other, Andrews initially and stuff like that. And then he had some injuries and he actually medically retired from the game, but then he came back, transferred to SMU. He's very similar to like a Kylan Granson, who, by the way, is the guy that he took over for in the exact same position in the SMU offense, as sort of that big slot kind of a guy. So he's a guy that I think is going to be available, sixth round, that could help out a team. Some people like that. The Maryland kid, Aquanu, I think is how you pronounce his last name. Jelani Woods from Virginia is like a big kid that can get down the field and move. Derek Deese didn't even get invited to Derek Deese Jr. His dad obviously played in the NFL. He didn't even get invited to the combine, but he was spectacular last year. He's a really athletic tight end that can get downfield and stretch the seam. And he's a little bit smaller. I think that's why the NFL didn't invite him. But as far as a guy that could be available in the sixth or seventh round, a guy who has NFL bloodlines, who's a very good receiver, who I know is going to pass the athletic threshold stuff, and was actually pretty good as a blocker in college. Now, it was more stuff out in space against smaller guys, not going to be an inline guy. But he's another guy that I would look at. And even if you want to take a developmental shot on a guy who's just like a Rico Gathers type. This year, Armani Rogers, a former quarterback from both Ohio and UNLV, that's one guy that I would toss into sort of that thing. Like he's like 6'6", 230 or 235 right now, but he hasn't tried to gain weight before. He's very athletic. He couldn't throw in college. That's the reason why, he sort of bounced around or whatever. But he's one of those guys, you get 15 pounds on him, maybe he can turn into something. So I really like this tight end class.
Excellent. Yeah.
Interesting to see where they all shake out.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's move on to wide receiver. And we kind of have to tie the Browns into this because, the Browns picked 13 and a lot of people think that the Browns pretty much have to take a receiver at 13. And I'm not going to, I'm not going to say anything negative about people who are thinking that right now, but I mean, we have free agency still coming up and things like this. So a lot of things can change. We haven't seen the combine yet. You don't know what players are going to be on the board at 13. So, let's just look at this wide receiver class and your favorites and, who would be there at 13 that would be, the guys that the Browns couldn't pass on. And if they don't take a guy at 13, is there enough of a difference in this class that the Browns can, that the Browns would be okay? I mean, is the depth such that the Browns can get enough value, later on in the draft, maybe trade up, trade down, whatever, but their next pick's at 44. it sure seems to me like there's a lot of value and a lot of depth in this wide receiver class. A lot of guys I like, and I haven't looked at this class nearly as much as Jeff has, and not even closely, as much as you have. So
what Rod? I would position it this way: how many guys in this class are true number ones, and what's the drop off to the high number twos?
Well, in terms of that is where you would have to pop, the wide receiver at 13, I think, because the guys that are true blue projectables to wide receiver 1, that is a smaller list. Treylon Burks, for sure. If Treylon Burks was there, if I was the Browns, I would have to think really hard about that. He's going to be my wide receiver 1. He's a guy. Some people comp him to AJ Brown because he played in the slot a lot and his build, but he's more athletic than AJ Brown. He's just not nearly as polished coming out. Some people comp him to Deebo Samuel, and his usage is sort of similar. He's one of those guys that you can do so many different things with. So that's similar, but he's bigger. He's a more fortified version of that. So it's hard to. I've seen some people comp him to Andre Johnson. I've seen some people comp him to Demaryius Thomas. But however you sort of split the baby on that one, I think he's the guy in this class that has the highest potential just because of his physical package. Another guy I like a lot, and this guy would have been in contention, I think, for wide receiver 1 if he hadn't torn his ACL in the national title game, is Jameson Williams. He reminds me a ton of Jerry Jeudy coming out. He's a little bit over 6 foot, or 6'1". He's sort of skinny, but he's extremely sudden on the field. He's one of those, like, the thing that reminds me about Jeudy about him is Jeudy could accelerate from 0 to 60 just immediately. He was full speed immediately, like his second step. That's very similar. And then Jeudy could also do the thing on the field where he literally just stop on a dime. Like there was times in college where the defender would just fly by him because of his momentum, because Jeudy could just literally just slam on the brakes. That's something you see with Jameson Williams too. But, again, he's coming off that torn ACL in January. He's not going to be ready for the start of camp. So, for me now, he's probably more of a late first round guy. But hell, if he fell into the second round because of that injury, I would be all about, even moving up to get him. And then, of course, you guys know the Ohio State kids. Garrett Wilson would be my preference of those two, because I think they're both really, really good route runners. I just think that Garrett Wilson is more athletic. And there was a stat I seen in, I think it was Cynthia Freeland. She did it was like an analytics mock draft kind of like, and she had put in there that based on, and I don't even know how they aggregate. I need to get this data because I was fascinated by this stat, but that on an average per route that Garrett Wilson created more yards of separation than anyone else in this class. And I also know that he's a very, very skilled guy, just outside of that, as well. So you would have to put him up there. I like Olave as well. Olave is probably going to go later than he would have if he'd come out the year before. But as far as a late first round guy, I'd be in on him too. He's done it for too long. Yeah. I mean, like he's been whipping Big Ten corners for years now. So I don't have any problem with his projection at all. I think it comes down to what your taste is and how you want to go about it. But if you're the Browns and you want to get a guy like Burks or the Ohio State kids, you're going to have to pop them in the first round because that's where they're going. You
have Drake London a little bit lower than these other guys? So
London to me is, and this is sort of a philosophical thing where I think it's harder to do, and maybe this is just a bias, but I think it's harder to do my job than it is for the NFL folks, because, as far as stacking a draft board, because the NFL folks, you have a clearly delineated system. You have clearly delineated coaches that are looking for these very specific things. And then you have a clearly delineated roster where you already have numerous holes plugged. So you don't have to look at the entire board of players. You can start crossing them out. That's why when you hear people like, I put out a 500 player big board. And then, sometimes you'll hear that an NFL team's, board was only 150 or 200 deep. And so, people are probably like, why do you go so deep? Well, it's because I have to rate all these players just sort of, without a very specific prism to look through. You know what I'm saying? Right. And so Drake London, as far as that goes, is an extremely good fit for a specific kind of team, and I don't think as good of a fit for another kind of team. The team that he needs to go to it's a quarterback with a bazooka arm that it's a downfield passing game. So I think he would be a perfect fit. For instance, with the Buffalo Bills, you saw Gabe Davis at the end of last season, in the playoffs, really coming on as that downfield guy for Josh Allen. Josh Allen has the biggest arm in the NFL. Gabe Davis had that 4-touchdown game. Well, Drake London is just a bigger, longer, more athletic, more skilled, flat, better player than Gabe Davis. If you can put Drake London into that spot, you change the entire dynamic of that offense. Because Drake London, his big, he's 6'5" and he's 225 or whatever, very big outside receiver, but he gets downfield. And the thing that he is the best at in this class, it's ball skills. And it's also and that goes into contested situations as well. If you have a rebound downfield, the ball falling out of the sky, he will get higher than the defender, and he's coming down with that ball. So, for that specific kind of a team, he's going to be awesome. And also, we go back to the spacing thing. You talk about an awesome thing as far as spacing for opening up space on the other side for Stephon Diggs. You can't double that guy anymore. Opening up space for Cole Beasley. If he lines up on his side of the field and you have to have a deep guy back to help the corner with Drake London, that's going to open up a lot of space for him. It's going to open up more space for Josh Allen to run. It's going to open up more space for those running backs, stuff like that. A worse fit for him is a team where it's more based in that sort of intermediate area where Drake London, what's going to have to win the day for him is creating a little bit of separation to give his quarterback a throwing window on sort of like the third step back, and he just sort of tries to drive the ball in the intermediate range. That's not as much of his game. So for instance, Jalen Hurts is a passer like that, where his utility, it's all in that intermediate sector. I wouldn't want Drake London on the Eagles. I'm not sure that I would want him on the Browns, right? It's not as much of that, just fling it up downfield and hope he comes down with it, sort of a schema there. So for me, Drake London is very specific to the team. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's an important distinction that most of us miss, is that you grade the guy based on his talent, but also his fit. And, we don't right now know what our passing offense is even going to look like. So it's pretty hard for us to say, well, this receiver was going to flourish, in whatever we're going to try to do this year. Just kind of continuing that thought, Thor, the next tier of guys. You talked a little bit about Christian Watson, and there's 3 or 4 other guys. You mentioned Romeo Dubs. I'm not sure how to say his last name. Guys like Eric Ezekam, I've thrown his name out a bit. I love watching his tape, just exciting. Then there's a few other guys. I mean, who are your favorites in that next tier? And I personally think the Browns need to take a second receiver, either in the mid to later rounds. So who would you think that would be the best fit for us?
Yeah, well, so Landry's coming back, right? So the slot's taken care of. You're looking specifically for an outside guy, correct?
I think we've kind of come to the conclusion that he's not.
He's not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, his money's not guaranteed. So, and he's set to make 15, 16 million. So I would think they're probably going to part ways.
So, I mean, if that opens up the slot receiver position as well, I mean, you have a lot of different options. One guy that I really like is Kyle Phillips from UCLA. He was a guy that played predominantly in the slot for Chip Kelly, but he's very skilled. He's very fluid. He went down to the Shrine Game and may have even been the best player at the Shrine Game. And I reported down from the Senior Bowl when Danny Gray from SMU, when he got injured and pulled out of the Senior Bowl, I think this was on Wednesday. The Senior Bowl's first choice to replace him was Kyle Phillips. It's just that they couldn't get him across the country because the Shrine Game now is competing in the same week as the Senior Bowl. So the logistics of it were too hard. But Kyle Phillips is probably a guy that should have gotten an invite to the Senior Bowl. So he would be a guy to look at. Eric, not at home, Eric Galko, the guy that now runs the Shrine Game. He actually comps him to Cooper Kupp, which that's a bit high for me. But I think a rich man's Hunter Renfrow, I think he's a better version of Hunter Renfrow. So I mean, he'd be one guy. Skye Moore,
slight difference there.
Slight difference there. Yeah, I mean, Cooper Kupp was, historically destructive at the level that he played at, of course. Skye Moore is another guy that I like. Skye Moore, he played on both inside and outside at Western Michigan. He's going to be a slot guy in the NFL because he's shorter than 5'10", but he's really good. He's really hard to keep track of. He's really hard to stay on, and he generally makes the play. He has some really, really impressive tape. And then going even deeper, I like Ezukama just fine. Ezukama is going to be available, maybe even late rounds, certainly mid rounds. But at the worst, I think he's like Nick Westbrook of Indiana from a couple of years ago, a guy that's still playing in the league now. And I think he added a hyphen to his name and some or other. But I think Ezukama is a better version of that guy. He's a very stout, strong outside receiver that has pretty good ball skills. So, definitely later on there, I know that he's going to hang around in the league. A sleeper guy, I might have mentioned this earlier on, you go even deeper, is Bo Melton from Rutgers. He's a guy that consistently gains separation, whether it was in college, whether it was at the Senior Bowl practices, stuff like that. It's just he's coming out, sort of like what I was mentioning with Goodson. He's coming out of this awful situation where Rutgers last year, I think they only threw for 2,000 yards total. And going back, the last couple of years, it was sort of the same thing. It was this risk-averse offense that didn't have good throwers at quarterback. And so the fact that Bo Melton could beat cornerbacks off the line all the time, it didn't really, a lot of times it didn't manifest into anything because the quarterback wasn't getting him the ball. But if you look at his dominator rating when he's on the field, and his share of the workload there, they were going to Bo Melton because he, was just, such a skilled player or whatever. So he would be another guy later on that I would look at as sort of a value buy just because his price is going to be artificially suppressed because of the situation he's coming out of.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question for you, Thor, and I've asked this question of a couple other people already and gotten different answers. But by the way, Rod hasn't brought up your 1.0 mock. I was
saving it. I figured we'd bring that up with the Browns. But yeah, go ahead. Let's get into that.
Interestingly, at 13, you have the Browns going with George Karlaftis out of Purdue. You obviously aren't aware of the fact that we have to take a wide receiver at 13, according to all the fans and media here in Cleveland. But I've posed this question to other people. If we can't get the wide receiver one we want at 13, or if there are better players available at 13, okay, who are the guys? And for me, Karlaftis is one of them. Okay, but who are the guys that would force you to not take a wide receiver at 13?
Yeah,
that could drop there.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, for me with the and obviously, it sounds like, Cleveland's just all in on the receiver. But for me, I think maybe even the bigger need, and this, of course, depends on free agency. It's the defensive front seven. Okay. I think, yeah. And so that's why I ended up going there. But of course, that's going to depend on if, I'm blanking on the name of the edge rusher you guys have that you're, is it Clowney. Yeah. So that's going to, that pick and that projection is entirely dependent on whether Clowney is re-signed. But Karlaftis would be a very good fit if he's not. And, if they do bring back Clowney, I think they still have needed interior defensive line and at off-ball linebacker. Now, the interior defensive line class, it's good. And it's got sort of a potpourri of guys. I don't know if there's one guy there that I would take in that spot. I don't think I'm going to take Jordan Davis that high. Devontae Wyatt, his teammate, is a really good player too. I'm not sure that I would take them either. Day 2 seems like the sort of the better day for that. And if the Browns did, some organizations view this differently as far as off-ball linebackers, they won't take them in the top 15. But if the Browns were serious about that, you got a couple studs that I think would be worth potentially looking at in Devin Lloyd of Utah and Nakobe Dean of Georgia. So the edge rusher, again, depending on what happens with Clowney, but there's certainly other ways you could go. And depending on the way the board falls, if a Burks is there, or if they're really high on, for instance, Garrett Wilson, they certainly go that way too.
You notice Thor did not bring up Tyler Linderbaum because Thor has Tyler Linderbaum going to his Vikings at 12. So he figures
being gone long
be
before us.
I'm hoping so. Yeah, I mean, I watched a lot of Tyler Linderbaum because I went to Iowa for grad school, and so when we're covering the games for Saturday for NBC, I always assign myself the Iowa games, of course. And I was mentioning to you guys earlier, I think that the Iowa offensive line was just trash outside of him last year, but like he was. Just so much better, than everyone around him in terms of that. And this goes back a couple of years. And there's even still a ceiling to develop there, I think, because Tyler Linderbaum, I don't know that a lot of people know this. He actually went to Iowa as a defensive line recruit. And then Ferentz, after, in the bowl practice heading up to his first bowl game, switched him to center. And it turned out he was a prodigy there. So he is still learning. He's still getting better. And and maybe just because I'm a Vikings fan, I'm really hoping that they take Linderbaum because I think it'd be a good fit, and I think he's an effing stud.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I've gushed over him over the last few weeks as well.
Jeff brings him up every time.
When you say he's cost certainty personified, that rings a lot of bells with me.
Yeah, this is sort of a Minneapolis thing, but like, when I did that mock, there were some Vikings fans that were like tweeting at me and being like, if we take a center that high just because, the last one we took in the first round busted, I'm done, or like whatever. But Garrett Bradbury, he was a different prospect. Garrett Bradbury was in the 97, 98th percentile in terms of athleticism. For centers coming into the league. And as far as his zone blocking system, projected well with the movement and getting out, getting linebackers. He could pull and stuff like that. He did all sorts of things at NC State. But there was one red flag on his evaluation, and that was dealing with power. We had seen this in college where the bull rusher guys could get under his pads and forklift him. And what you were hoping for was just being in that zone system that, maybe he could get some help, as far as pass rushing, if he was against a power guy or, different stuff like this. But in the NFL, that has proven to be a real problem. He gets pushed into Kirk Cousins' lap consistently. Tyler Linderbaum does not have that issue. Tyler Linderbaum was one of the best high school wrestlers in the country when he was coming out of Iowa. I posted a thing on my Twitter where he beat Tristan Wirfs in a heavyweight fight heavyweight wrestling duel in Iowa. I think Wirfs got him twice, but Linderbaum got him, one of the last times that they wrestled before Wirfs was off to Iowa. Linderbaum just has a really good idea. He is athletic, yes, and all that sort of stuff, but he just has an intuitive feel for the grappling as well, which comes into play in all sorts of ways, including dropping your anchor, because of his time, in Iowa wrestling. And again, he was elite at that in a state where wrestling is, extremely important, way more important than in a lot of states.
Hey, let's get into the Browns a little bit more here, guys, and I think we'll mix in a little bit more edge talk because I think we want to hear a little bit more about your thoughts on some edge. But first of all, Thor, I wanted to go back to the podcast we did last year, and you and I talked about Greg Newsome and JOK or Woo, and you were really high on him last year. So I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on the Browns draft last year because we haven't talked since then.
I love their draft last year. I think.
How surprised were you that it happened that way?
Oh, well, I was very surprised. Yeah, I mean, both that, Newsome, I don't think a lot of people expected Newsome to be there, when they were initially when, we're doing mock drafts and stuff like that. So that was a bit of a surprise. And then the stunner was Owusu Koramoah falling to round 2. And that was something where in the moment I was, texting some of my contacts and stuff like that and trying to figure out what had gone on. And it turned out that it was that heart condition or whatever. But, just as a player on the field, I was pretty stunned that he was available where he was.
Yeah. So I want to bring up this tweet you put out because Jeff sent this to me, and we've been talking about Jeff and I have been talking on the podcast and other places about the way the Browns have been building their team, the way the team is built, strong offensive line and running the ball and short passes to the tight end and so forth, and comparing that to what we saw in the Super Bowl, and your tweet came out, futuristic Super Bowl. Someday your kids will ask you. They used to hand the ball off in football games. I just kind of want to get your thought, you know, and we've talked about this, but I guess the thought is, and I don't think you'll find a bigger Nick Chubb fan than me, but are the Browns, have the Browns built this thing wrong, or, because you look at who's in the playoffs, everybody's, most everybody's got a stud quarterback and some stud receivers, and they're firing the ball down the field. I know there's still a place for the running game in the league, but it is primarily a passing league, and it has been for a long time. So I just kind of want to get your thoughts on that and how it relates to the Browns.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is in part it's a team construction overall value question as well. And as a Vikings fan, going back a decade or so, there was the big thing about when Adrian Peterson was like a freak of nature stud. But there was this idea of like, should the Vikings just get rid of Adrian Peterson, because having him on the team, it forces them to play in this way that is now becoming antiquated in the NFL, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. Like, and so, I'm not sure that it's at that point with Chubb, but it becomes a thing of like, especially when you're devoting more a higher, and this was the issue with the Vikings with Peterson, you're allocating a higher percentage of your cap to that guy, and he's forcing you to play in this sort of old school type way. Would you just be better off? Going with three disparate backs that you can put into a committee and guys that are better as sort of air backs, and then spreading the defense. There's more than one way to skin a cat. So I don't think it's a thing where it's like, this guy hurts you have to move, a different way, or philosophically it's got to be a different thing. Nick Chubb's an absolute stud, and certainly, in the right scenario, he could be on a Super Bowl winning team. It's just about how, you construct the rest of the thing around him, because the reason that, I put that tweet out is like a lot of these things, where it used to be the traditional running concept, now you got the extended handoffs to the outside, where they're throwing the ball behind the line of scrimmage. You see a lot more of that stuff. You see a lot more of the stuff with the quarterback. You see a lot more of the stuff of putting the linebacker in conflict by doing RPOs and stuff like that, where you don't need the traditional grinded out stud between the tackles, because you can get these athletes in space, and maybe you didn't have to devote as much draft capital to them, but you're getting them into space, and then you're also inside the box. You can get a commensurate amount of yards just merely by confusing the linebacker and forcing him to try to do three different assignments at once.
Yeah. It's just something, I guess, we've felt like the Browns have really had something going, the last couple seasons. And obviously, they had a nice season in 2020, but it's primarily been built on the defense, which got better this season near the end of the season, and the run and Baker's ability in 2020 to make plays when he had to. It was never really built completely around the pass. So it just kind of brings up the question when you watch really all of the playoffs this season of hey, are we doing this thing right? So I guess you don't know until you see how your team does for a couple more seasons. So
1,000%. I think that's some, the Titans, not that they're necessarily grappling with it. They wouldn't want to get rid of Derrick Henry, but they're obviously the team that is built the most that way. And they've been trying to figure out ways to, take the offense beyond, their the sort of exotic smash mouth sort of a thing, and getting in, the Julio Jones, and obviously, AJ Brown developing was fabulous for that. But the way the NFL is going, as far as like the Sean McVay coaching tree, the Mike Shanahan coaching tree, as you guys know, it's totally different. Those guys aren't going out and devoting, a top 50 pick to one running back that is going to get the enormous amount of usage, and then we're going to run downhill. It's more about mixing and matching based on, and this is sort of an analytics thing, if you want to call it that, or You could just call it football moving closer to the baseball concept of a platoon and putting players in the best possible situations, to play up their strengths, and then not putting them on the field in situations where they have weaknesses. That's where, if you have a 3-man running back room where they all have these, different kind of skill sets, that you can get them all to play up just by the way that you're using them.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Browns, the Browns are missing a lot of pieces on that defensive line. So let's go back there and get a few more thoughts from you. And Jeff, if you want to throw some names out here too, but if the Browns don't end up with one of the top defensive ends like Karlaftis, and they're looking maybe second round, what edge guys are your favorites there? And I guess the interior defensive line, I guess this probably isn't a great class. Who do you like? I can't imagine the Browns would be drafting anybody real high at that spot. So we're probably looking, third, fourth round at the earliest. So who do you like at that position?
At first the edge, and then interior or interior?
Probably edge first. I would think, if the Browns don't go edge at 13, I would think they would be looking edge at 44 if they don't double up at wide receiver, which would kind of be unusual.
Yeah, 1,000%. Yeah,
we've kind of come to the conclusion that Jadeveon Clowney is not coming back as well, Thor.
So, yeah, I mean, in that case, and if you don't take the guy in the first round, one guy that I would be interested in day two, it's a kid named Kingsley Enagbare from South Carolina. He's not the tallest, but he is extremely long. Like, his wingspan is ridiculous, and he's one of those edge rushers that their game, it's a combination of length and strength. He has very powerful hands. He keeps the distance between him and the offensive lineman. He disengages really quickly, and he gets where he's going real quick. And he has this enormous tackling strike zone, essentially, because he's built like a pterodactyl. He was a guy who I think was top 5 in terms of pressure rate, PFF graded pressure, or just, statistical pressure rate last season from this edge class. So some people, he's not sexy enough for them because he's not taller. He's not gonna. Some of these other guys are gonna test a little bit better. But Enagbare, you go back, years in the SEC, and he has licked some NFL type guys. And because of his skill set, he's one of those guys that can set the edge. He can play the run. But he's also going to be a handful in pass rushing situations as well, just because of the length, the strength, and then the relentlessness as well.
And what are your thoughts on
Cameron Thomas? Is Cameron Thomas a true defensive end?
So Cameron Thomas, he concerns me a little bit more because I think coming in, you were sort of thinking about him as a guy that could be sort of a hybrid piece where he could play, on the outside on running downs, and then he could play on the inside on passing downs and stuff like this. Like maybe I think maybe some people viewed him as sort of like an AJ Epinesa or even a little bit better version of that. But when he went to the Senior Bowl, he measured in smaller than we thought he was going to. I forget, I don't have the measurements in front of me, but you started to wonder a bit. For sure, then he can't, at that size, he's not going to be able to moonlight inside in the NFL. So he's stuck on the outside, and you wonder if is he able to steal the edge on people? I know that he's going to be able to play the run and set the edge, but is he going to be able to steal it? I don't know that he has that explosion, or the first step and stuff like that, and then. The pass rushing, it's not as refined for me where, as far as like with the playing up the strength and stuff like that. Enagbare is a guy that I like more as far as a projection, as far as that goes. So Thomas is interesting. There's some people that see him, in that hybrid sort of way. There's other people that see him in sort of a tweener way. And so we'll see what it ends up being with him, but I wouldn't take him as high as maybe, coming into the Senior Bowl that maybe some people had him.
Does Logan Hall fit that same kind of a profile?
I like Logan Hall more, actually, but it is similar in that teams are still deciding what he is going to be in the NFL, because he's like 6'5" plus, a little bit smaller, I believe, on the scale, but he's like 275 right now. And so you wonder with him, he has such a rangy frame. You wonder can we add weight to him and potentially could he move inside permanent? Could he play there more? Could he do the moonlight thing, or is he just sort of a rangy, well-built edge? But I like Logan Hall a lot. He's very active. Of course he's another one of those kids who has really good length. He also, the effort is there. And what I saw at the Senior Bowl was he has a deep well of moves, pass rushing moves and counter moves and stuff like that. So if you shut down his initial thing, whatever he's trying to do initially, because of his length and because of his ability to just seamlessly, try out differently. Oh, that didn't work. Let's try this one. Let's try this one. Usually he is finding himself in the backfield. So I like Logan Hall a lot, but your point's well taken that there is an element to it of teams are still deciding, is he a 3-4 defensive end? Can he play 3 technique? Is he in the 4-3 where you play him? So there is some of that for sure.
So based on where we sit right now, I mean, other than Myles Garrett, we pretty much need everything. So I'm in favor of taking all of them.
Yeah.
I mean, next after passing game, I think the most important thing in the NFL is pressuring the quarterback, right? And we just have a ton of question marks there.
Yeah, not many guys returning at all. Yeah.
Yeah, and certainly going to be options for that. And then, the interior defensive line, I think, that's probably the place that, I might have mentioned this before, but that's the place that I would look at on day 2, because I think that's where the value and the strength of that class is going to be. I'm not overpaying for a guy like Jordan Davis that you're probably taking off the field on third down. Devontae Wyatt, I think he's going to get a price inflation just because, in that sort of top tier, he's the sort of the 3-down guy. But there's so many guys that on day 2 are going to be there that, again, guys for different tastes and stuff like Travis Jones. He was just knocking people's heads together in Mobile. He's more of your prototypical, the space eater guy inside, the war daddy guy that's going to occupy multiple blocks. And if he's going up against a guy like Garrett Bradbury in the NFL and you leave him one-on-one, he's going to put Garrett Bradbury and Kirk Cousins' legs. Like, his game is it's the strength. Then you also have this sort of smaller, more active sort of guys like DeMarvin Leal from Texas A&M, Perrion Winfrey, another guy that really opened eyes at the Senior Bowl, more sort of the speed penetration guys from the 3 technique position. And you can go deeper where there's really interesting guys. One of my former colleagues, I was just talking to him about Jaden Peavy, a Texas A&M teammate of DeMarvin Leal, and he loves him. Was just could not say enough good things about him. He called him a bad mother, and so he's another guy sort of in there that's he plays pissed off and he's a really well built wide sort of interior presence. So a lot of different things there. Again, waiting on that until day 2, I think you're going to be able to find something.
Nice. Well, the Browns have 9 picks. I mean, it sounds from what you're saying, Thor, that we should be pretty optimistic about the value that the Browns are going to get all the way through the 4th, 5th. I mean, I think we have a lot of confidence in Andrew Berry, the GM anyways, but it sounds like there should be a lot of solid value through that 2nd, 4th round pick which is like 117, I think.
I think so. Yeah. And if, last year, I think in my mock draft, I think I had given them the Browns, Christian Barmore. And maybe, we'll never know, but if Newsom was off the board or, maybe it would have gone that way, but I don't mind at all. And in fact, I love the GMs that aren't stuck on we need this position. We need, with this pick, we need to come out with this thing because it allows you more flexibility where, we talked before about how Newsom, no one expected him to be available when the Browns were picking. It so happened that he was. And so you get that. And then in the 2nd round, it opens stuff up for you, you're already sort of playing with house's money from a value perspective. And then Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah just falls. It's a gift from God, right? The other NFL teams got skittish about his health profile, but you watch that kid on the field, you take him in the slot the Browns took him at, and it's not a risk anymore. The upside is so high at that point where, and the downside is like he wasn't even considered close to the, at least from what I had heard, to like the Maurice Hurst thing coming out. And so the risk of that, it didn't seem nearly commensurate enough to push him down the board to where you did. And so I love the executives that are open to all possibility. They're not going to go necessarily off the reservation with it. But where they're open to the different possibilities. And to your point, I think that's something that the Browns are going to be able to leverage again this year. There's, if you want to say wide receiver, edge, interior defensive line, and linebacker, maybe you'd even have a couple more buckets than that. But if you just want to say those four for the first round, let's just take the best guy available, right there. And then, you still, going down, if you don't zero in on that, the other position should be able to fill you up at your next couple picks. What we don't want is a situation like, for instance, Dave Gettleman and Urban Meyer last year, where Dave Gettleman, he wanted Devonta Smith and thought he was going to get him. And then all of a sudden the Eagles trade up and, Gettleman's like, oh, my God, what do I do? And so he trades down 8 or 9 spots and he overdrafts the absolute hell out of Kadarius Toney. Like the trade to get the extra first round pick, that's great. But you've hurt yourself from a value perspective in that transaction by overdrafting Kadarius Toney by 40 or 50 picks. And then Urban Meyer, who thought, no one in the NFL is as dumb and stubborn as me. No one will take Kadarius Toney over me. It's not possible. And then Dave Gettleman's like, hold my beer. And so, Gettleman steals Toney from him. And then Urban Meyer's like, well, shit, what do I do? And he ends up taking Travis Etienne with this idea of turning him into like an H-back slot, Paris Campbell, Curtis Samuel type guy from his old Ohio State offense. Is like, or Percy Harvard. It's like, dude, what the hell are you doing? Like Travis Etienne is the worst thing he did in college was receiving. So that's the kind of thinkers we do not want making our decisions. We want the guys who are fluid and, it's like Bruce Lee said, it's like water. You just react to what's around you. You do the best in that circumstance. I think the Browns do that.
Yep.
Well, I can only hope that when pick 44 rolls in that I jump off my couch and scream yes like I did last season when the second round pick came in.
For sure.
Anything like that, I'll be excited because I've got a lot of confidence. But Jeff, do you have any other questions for Thor? We've kept him for a while. I know he's got some other things that he would probably like to be working on.
Right. No, it's been a pleasure, Thor. I really thoroughly enjoyed speaking with you today. And we're still early in the process, like we said, but let's see how all this shakes out. And good luck to Tyler Linderbaum in Minnesota.
Absolutely. I hope we get him. And it was great talking to you guys. I think this is the first I've been on, of course, with Rod a couple times in the past, but I think it's the first time we've done it. So it was good talking to you as well.
Yeah, definitely. So, Thor, is there anything you'd like to leave the fans of Cleveland with? Any words of wisdom?
Well, I think maybe that you had higher hopes last year. So I think there's how to put this. It seems like there's a little bit more pessimism when I read Cleveland stuff about the trajectory of the team than I would put on. Like I think Cleveland's doing well. Like a couple years ago, we talk about like identifying areas of your team that must improve and then going after it. A couple years ago, we were talking about offensive line, right? And like the things that they had to do to fix that, and they went about that and they did so, right? And this is what you want to see. And then the thing where with the draft, you're going to take the best possible values, at some of these positions. Like those things we're seeing. There might be some individual disappointment with individual players, between Beckham or maybe Mayfield. People want him to be a little bit better, but the philosophy behind what is being put onto the field, it seems like a true sort of thought process to me. And so if I was a Browns fan, I'd be excited for the future.
Absolutely. So everybody can follow you and find your stuff at ThorKU. Is there anything else you have going on? Anything else you want to plug?
Yeah, you can find Thorku on Twitter, and then on NBC Sports Edge. We have all the pre-draft stuff right now. I was in, did all the Senior Bowl stuff before, and next week, actually, I think it's a week from Tuesday, I'm flying to Indianapolis for the Combine. So definitely follow along on Twitter. I'll be posting a whole bunch of stuff from inside that ballroom, interviewing people and stuff like that. And if anyone out there has any questions for any of these prospects that you want to hear answered, definitely shoot it to me on Twitter, and I'll see what I can do for you.
Excellent. Oh, we appreciate it. It's been great talking to you. This has been the Browns Blitz, and we will catch you next time.